Oludamini, what can we say about the role of art in diverse religious traditions? Because certainly we'd all agree that art has played a role in virtually every religion. In fact, we could say that art and religion have co-evolved, and there's a lot of anthropological work along those lines. But certainly today you see it in all where the art is different in different forms, but it is still, the art forms are all there. So what does that mean about the potential of art playing a role in harmonizing religion in several respects? Harmony is a funny word. We don't want them all singing exactly the same tune. That's not harmony. Harmony is when different tunes sort of work together in different ways. What role can art play among diverse religions?
I think it can play a central role. One in a kind of, I don't mean to denigrate this, but one of a kind of more superficial way and then in a deeper way. So for example, the more superficial way. France has a lot of issues with Islamophobia, for example, but French tourists will queue for hours to see works of Islamic art, to see the Alhambra, even to see works of like a Persian Sufi musician or Qawwali performers come to France to perform. People will queue for hours. Those same people would never want a Muslim living next door to them will pay top dollar to go see, hear Islamic art. So Islamic art is what I call a kind of silent theology. So it's a way of presenting the beauty of the tradition, the beauty of the realities described, perceived by those people in the tradition, in a way that cuts through a lot of the political nonsense that's dividing people today. So that's kind of, it can harmonize different populations. People can be joined together in their appreciation of beauty, regardless of these other political, ethnic, and other things that are dividing people. So that's the more superficial way. The more profound way you see in places like India, so North Indian classical music, Hindustani classical music, is as much a result of Vedic musical theories and practices as it is of Sufi. So Ravi Shankar was very famous. His master was Ustad Ala Raka, a Muslim. So you have, in the same school, you have Muslim masters who have Hindu students, Hindu masters who have Muslim students. Same thing in the world of South Asian Bhakti poetry as well too. You have this incredible cross-fertilization of mystics at the kind of operating at the very highest, the very deepest level, and there's a mutual recognition and borrowing of techniques, ideas, and metaphors from each other in informing art. And this has contributed up until very recently, until the British partition and Hindu nationalism, things like that, in the remarkable harmony that you saw between Muslim and Hindu populations, because there was this shared aesthetic culture that bound people together and presented, still with the distinctions, the incredible diversity. There's almost no place on earth as diverse as South Asia. Respecting the diversity, but binding people in a kind of transcendent vision. So the unity is at the level of the transcendent, not at the level of the immanent, which is what allows for diversity with harmony.
So you are, I would say, an embodiment of multiculturalism because you were born in the U.S., you were raised in Nigeria as a very young child, and then back to the U.S. and then back to Nigeria on vacation. And you've, in your intellectual life, have studied not only neuroscience, but philosophy of religion and literature, and have become somewhat very heavily invested in African religion and African relations. So you really have multiple perspectives to look at this. And as you view all of that, what are there proactive steps that you can take to make people use art to show that the other is not so much the other?
Absolutely. So for example, I teach an Intro to Islam in Africa class, but I teach it through the arts. So the assignments that students do, they don't write papers. What they have to do is they have to do a work of calligraphy and of geometric design. So I give them lots of examples. I give them some of the basic principles. They have to compose a poem in the Sufi style. They have to design a mosque in a contemporary African city. So through these creative engagements, they gain a little bit of fluency. So instead of just learning about the other, they learn from the other. In a certain sense, they learn some of these traditions.
And actually try to be the other.
And actually try to be, in a certain sense. And so artistic craft in particular, I find, can really bring people together, unite, and allows them to play with the ideas and make them their own in a certain way that I found very effective at making them more aware of their own particularities and where they're coming from and their own backgrounds, as well as learning the particularities of these other traditions, the artistic. And of course, the artistic is always embedded in the social and political context, as well as the spiritual and metaphysical vision of the world. So they learn about those things as well too. So that's a small pedagogical thing that I found tremendously helpful with my students. And I do the same thing when I teach intro to Yoruba religions, these Orisha traditions that started in West Africa and through the transatlantic slave trade spread to the Caribbean and South America as well too. I have students not just read about these traditions, but actually produce works of poetry, of sculpture, and things like that in the traditions, so they can try to see the world through the eyes of these traditions.
As you well said, most Westerners who are literate are very familiar with Muslim art in both design and history, but less so African. Yeah. What can you say about African art that can give us the same sense that the geometric design of a mosque can immediately give us this direct sense of Islamic culture?
One of the clearest expressions is in music and dance. There's a proverb in Yoruba, laisi lu kosijo, laisi jo kosilu. Without dance, there's no drumming. Without drumming, there's no dance. So this relationship of interdependence, mutual interdependence, underlies a lot of African art. African art also tends to be very evocative and focus on evoking not just emotions, but spiritual realities within people, within the world, and the spoken word is very important. Some artworks aren't active until the proper incantation has been said over it. So there's a connection between the spoken, the visual, and the perception and the effect that it has. So you can, if you've ever seen African drum and dance performances, particularly from West Africa, but throughout the continent, there's this incredible dialogue between the drummer and the dancer. You can't always tell who's leading who, and an incredible sense of polyrhythmic layering, one on top of the other. And so you have these rhythms, these cycles that are harmoniously added, one on top of the other, one on top of the other, one on top of the other, without any conflict. And this is very characteristic of a lot of African religious traditions, in which, to give the Yoruba case, for example, there are 401 different Orisha traditions that all exist kind of in harmony with each other. And you can see that incredible multiplicity, that incredible dynamism in harmony. You can hear it in the music. And if you know, it's a bit harder, but if you know what to look for in the art, you can see it as well too. So that it's tough because even just amongst one ethno-linguistic group, the Yoruba, there's so many diverse art forms, let alone you go to the San people in the Kalahari Desert, sometimes called the Bushmen, completely different, very, very different tradition. So speaking about even sub-Saharan African art is a bit like speaking of Asian art.
Sure,
you've got Buddhist art, you've got Japanese Buddhist art, you've got Sri Lankan.
Yeah. Human beings have a tendency of seeing the other homogeneously.
Yep. Exactly.
But you see your own culture's enormous variety and differences. And that's just a natural process of who we live with and why. So to Americans, all Chinese look alike. To all Chinese, all Americans look alike. So this is a very natural human tendency. That's why it's important to understand the variety within each country. And then each country will say that our country is the most different, that we have more varieties in ourselves than other countries do, and that's because they live with it. So this is it's a relativistic cognitive
it's relative in a certain sense, but in another sense, in Nigeria, there are 500 different ethnic groups and languages in one country of 200 some million people. So the level of, if we just go by linguistic groups, the level of linguistic diversity and density in a place like Nigeria is different from, the way you have a lot of linguistic diversity, let's say in New York or something like that, but it's very different from Kansas or Montana.
Right. And those are maybe cognate languages, but they're very different languages.
Some of them are from different language families. So Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo are from related. Niger Congo, Hausa is from which is
so
spoken
it's not
in
like
the
a
north.
Southern U.S. accent that I can understand.
No. Or even like so in South Africa, all of the languages more or less are Bantu languages. So they're somewhat cognate. In Nigeria, you have ones from completely different language families that are not mutually intelligible at all.
And therefore, and do you see differences in the art as a result of
Very much so. Very much. I mean, now there's been so many waves of influence from British colonization, Islam, and other things like that have smoothed out and homogenized some things. But when you go to the traditional forms, you see these radical differences across these different ethno-linguistic groups.
So is the big overview with your personal embodiment of multicultural art from all these different cultures, what is your message?
Reality is beyond anything that we can kind of encompass within our conceptual descriptions. Reality is reality, and we're a part of reality. We're not apart from reality. And it can take because that's the case, it can take unimaginably diverse forms, each of which can be incredibly beautiful if we take the time to learn how to appreciate it and understand it.